We see particularly a big opportunity into providing more insights about what customers are talking about in the reviews, what topics do they mention, what they like, what they don't like. So sentiment analysis around topics. And here we are going to share some insights that we found by analyzing the whole data set. And in the future, we envision this as a part of the product. So we are hoping to incorporate this inside of Judge.me admin, so you can get insights that are personalized for your brand and get more understanding about your reviews and the next actions.
Amazing. So let's start by defining this whole deck is all about the review sentiment. So Sylvester, what's review sentiment? So help us understand.
Thank you so much, Fab. I'm really excited about review sentiment because to me, review sentiment goes way beyond the written numbers. It actually unpacks emotions behind the words that are said in reviews. Sentiment reflects more of how the customer feels. It captures their satisfaction, their tone, their frustration. So it goes a lot deeper. And what is even more interesting with sentiment, you can actually look at what topics are being spoken about. So is it about the durability of the product, the appearance, or the quality? These are all topics, but when they come together, they come into kind of the product excellence category. So it becomes possible and uniquely exciting to pinpoint why someone, a customer, would rate an experience high or low. And by extension, we can estimate the effect of those topics or categories in driving overall sentiment. But what is really exciting, overall sentiment actually aligns very well with rating. So what customers are talking about is a high reflection of how they score the different brands. So it's exciting.
Amazing. So let's get straight into it. So what we did find out from our data?
Yeah, one of the key things we found out at the top level is that perceived value, that's a customer's perception of value, matters 50% more than service excellence in building trust. That's even twice as much the impact of delivery. So you can have the friendliest customer service in the world, you have the same day delivery service, but if the customers don't feel they got the value of money in anything they buy, trust collapse. It's not just about the cheapest, it's about how they feel when they unbox the product. And think of it like, yeah, this is worth it. Or is this actually worth it? That difference is massive in terms of trust.
This is really interesting from my perspective, because here what we're saying is, and we're going to see this in the presentation later today, in the slide, but of course product excellence play a big role, and we're going to see it in a few slides. Service excellence is important, delivery is important, but overall the perception really matter, right? Because you can have an amazing product, an amazing service, an amazing delivery. However, the way it's perceived, which is also quite unique to the person that sees, that experience it, it's what really makes it or break it. And I thought the proportion of it is so important. If we go into the next slide, this is more interesting, right?
Yeah, it actually reflects the category level explanation of what drives sentiment. Here, value for money simply dominates every other topic. It's actually more, in fact, the extent to which it dominates it, the next driver down, size and fit, is 3 times less as impactful as value for money. This margin is not just a marginal difference, it's a game changer. The rest of the list, let's not mistake it, they do matter, because when you start stacking them together, they become very important. That's things about product, look at the size, the design, very impactful. But then the value, how the customer perceives those things is huge. And you can have the best design in the world, the great customer support, the smoothest return process. However, if the customer don't perceive those as valuable, trust is broken.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sylvester. But I would maybe make a bit different conclusion from this, so we can discuss different points of view. I believe if we stack up all topics around product quality, it will actually aggregate also in quite a big chunk of potential of improvement. And we can see like size and fit, aesthetics and design, all of this like qualities around products potentially could be like quite a good investment for brands to invest into the product quality and see what customers like or don't like. And we can see that all of this is actually higher than service and delivery. And I believe later in the slides we also will have a trend around this, like how much the product quality matters.
And I think here there are like quite a few, like there are a few interesting points, right? For like for any merchant that like is listening to us today, and it's about we're going to discuss, you know, like how you shape the product, you shape the service, but here is how you can make the perception of the product and the service be clear. That's absolutely fundamental. So like our recommendation to you really is make the value visible. So as we say, signal fairness throughout the journey. So be transparent on the pricing, on delivery cost. It's like your buyers don't like surprises, yeah, and also shape this perception actively. What that means, like throughout the buyer journey, like if you have a product which has any characteristics, right, which is not necessarily evident to your buyers, you might want to communicate it very clearly. And that's like pre-purchase, like post-purchase, and it's very much important that you control and shape your customer journey throughout. Yeah. And this is another interesting one, right? Talking about
kind of steering away from perceived value and looking at isolating price. In negative review, prices or mentions of price appear 5 times as much in negative review than positive review. On average, you just think to yourself, oh, then it's a pricing problem. But when we look at the average sentiment of pricing, it's 0 minus 0.1. It draws the difference between pricing for positive review and pricing sentiment for negative review is just 0.1. That's the difference. So very small. So pricing tends to be the scapegoat when overall sentiment is bad. So it's not about the price itself. Price is mentioned when something else fails, or mentioned more when something else fails.
And from my side, I could add that I believe that quite aligns from what we know about the industry. E-commerce is very competitive industry. It's very saturated market. So that means that customers are price sensitive. So I guess it's very important to find the balance in the price where you still have good margin, but also customers feel that they're getting a good deal. And if the price goes up and the customers feels it's expensive, then they just become more demanding and more likely to complain about other aspects such as delivery or product quality, etc., etc.
And so what's the key takeaway here, right? It's very much important that you understand how your customer perceive like their purchasing journey. Potentially, this is a bit counterintuitive, right? Because when you receive a review and says, okay, this is like too expensive, maybe you think, okay, our price point is wrong. Actually, what we're saying here, what we discovered is that you should always look for what other element in those negative reviews guide you towards the element of your proposition that make it feel like the price is too high, because you don't necessarily have to cut prices. So always look, when you download your reviews, make your analysis, when there are certain topics and certain cluster around prices, don't stop there. Try to see where the expectation failed, because that's really gold for you, and that's really gold to keep shaping your proposition. And also, I think now going into the analysis, we analyzed, right, Sylvester, like how different element of the proposition, so product, price, service, they work with each other, right? So like, what's the interplay? And with some interesting finding.
I think the biggest one which we've alluded to in the past, is that product excellence, which is all about the product, delivers twice as much sentiment lift as delivery improvement. People can forgive slow, but they don't forgive bad products. A product can arrive late, but if you work brilliantly, it still gets a good review, or in fact, sometimes great reviews. People will literally say it took 3 weeks, but it's absolutely worth the wait. So it's really important the product excellence box is ticked. But a product that arrives fast and disappoints, the trust dies, at least according to our analysis. Yeah, so I think that's one of the biggest takeaway in this piece.
And there are more nuances to that, right? If we look
Yeah.
into this next slide. True, Anna?
Yeah, that's a very interesting slide. It's a bit difficult to understand, but my take from this is if we look at like what is the threshold of like what is the good product quality, we can see that this is a sentiment 4.5. So it means like quite high sentiment of the product quality. But if we look at like good delivery, it's 4.0. So our take from that is that you don't need to have the best delivery in the world, you just need to have good enough delivery. But if this criteria is not met, if the delivery is not good enough, then the sentiment score goes down. So you need to have very good product quality and good enough delivery. And this insight, I think, is quite interesting. Could be quite interesting for merchants to know like where to invest and to which extent it makes sense to invest.
Yeah, and I would focus the attention on the good enough delivery, right? I think it's really counterintuitive. We are in a world where like provider like Amazon have made us like so dependent on delivery. So delivery has to be like fast, like the day after, a few hours after. However, our data tell us a little bit like it's some different story, right? So of course, as Anne and Sylvester mentioned, you need to have a good delivery, but not perfect. Perfect is very expensive. Good enough is what actually work for you if your product is really great. And just to put this into perspective, these are real reviews, right? So that we have extracted like from our data set. But for example, my watch, it's perfect, but FedEx deliver my pack requested like 30 USD per import taxes. Probably the brand need to clarify this extra cost and customer will prepare in advance. You might read this and think, okay, so the customer wasn't really satisfied about the delivery. However, the rating is a 5. The sentiment analysis is 4.1. It's a pretty solid sentiment score. And this is a clear example on when the product was great and the delivery just didn't need to be perfect, but it need to be good enough. I really care like about this good enough idea. Or like similarly, in every other review that you can read in this page, you can tell like the product is what drives, and the delivery has to be that level of threshold. And I think as a recommendation for our users is, of course, you want to delight your customers, right? We know that it's important that you delight your customer, but it's also important where you have to decide the trade-off of like where to invest time, resource, money. You have to understand clearly like the balance here. And of course, the delivery needs to be accurate, but it doesn't necessarily need to be the next day. So you have to understand what your customer wants. So stop really overspending on logistic perfections, and understand what the good enough threshold for you. It's really also, it goes back to what we were saying about the perception of the value. If the perception of the shipping is that like they're going to receive it in 2 days and they're going to receive it like in amazing condition, and that's what you deliver, this is exactly like this is good enough. This is good enough for you. And we're going to answer to like a few questions. Just put it in the chat if you have it. We're going to answer like in the question. We're going to answer the questions like at the end. And this is another interesting interplay, right? And this is like about the service. Tell us a bit more, Sylvester.
Yeah, that's a really interesting aspect of one of our key findings here. When you have poor delivery, how do you recover poor delivery or poor products? Um, when we have poor delivery and you layer in a great service, you have a sentiment lift of 55%. Your support team practically reaches out to solve a problem proactively. That makes the customer feel heard, and that genuinely recovers the situation. But in terms of poor product, the scenario is slightly different. When a product itself disappoints, even great service has a lift of about 30%. We rescue just a third of the damage as against half of the damage last time. But why this difference? In my opinion, the difference is because delivery failures could be circumstantial. A late package is the problem of the courier service. But when products fail, they are more intentional. If a product breaks, customers feel the company sold me something substandard. So it makes it a little more difficult to kind of recover.
Absolutely. And I think there is also another interesting take to put this into perspective, which is like what we see in this slide, which is actually that everything that we're saying has to be put almost like into context, right? Because there is a sensitivity which is based on the specific categories. And what you're seeing on screen here, it's a clear example. If you look at the furniture and the electronics, right, we're seeing a two different component here. So the delivery sensitivity and the support sensitivity. These two sensitivity are almost opposite. So that shows like what's the buyer's behavior on that. So the furniture people want the delivery to be perfect almost, as opposed that as the support. The electronics is almost the opposite effect. It's interesting, isn't it, Anna?
Yeah, very interesting. It shows us again and again, like when we look into the data, that regional aspect is very important, category is very important, price point of the product is very important. So we've done our best job to try to summarize general insights, but everything should be put into perspective, and we are going to have few slides later to also look into like different countries and regional perspective.
And then also we have analyzed, and I'm going to hand over to Sylvester in this, but we have analyzed certain components of the proposition that might not be extremely frequent, but they are hurtful when they happen. So we call them the hidden killers. Yeah. What are they?
I think the first one is the billing and payment issue. It appears only 1 in 200 reviews. You might not even see them for over a month, but when they occur, they erode about 40% of sentiment, even more than returns. Everything, it's a killer. The moment it's there, it takes away the sentiment. So why are they so toxic, in my opinion? Because money mistake destroys trust instantly. Customers can forgive inconvenience, a delay package, complicated return processes. These are frustrating but fixable. But anything that has to do with billing error, the customer thinks either the business is incompetent or trying to cheat them. Neither perception is recoverable by a simple apology. What do you guys think?
This also aligns with some of qualitative research we've been doing with customers. We know that having secure payment methods, smooth flow to make a payment is super important into the funnel and into conversion, and just in building trust with the website as well. So I think the data aligns here with what we are hearing from customers.
And really the way to make sure that this doesn't happen, it is somewhat simple, right? So I think our recommendation is, first of all, audit your payment journey regularly. Make sure that almost you have a billing accuracy in your KPI when you like in your operations, and also again going back to the idea of perceived value, it's make sure that the refund are visible, that you clearly communicate how people can access it when there is when there is money issue. And on this refund, we actually have an interesting point, right, Sylvester?
Yeah, it is. It is. This slides reveal something fascinating about customer memory. It's about the outcome. It's not about the outcome. It's about the effort required. Look at the difference in how customers talk about returns. Happy customers barely mention it. Unhappy customers talk about returns 8 times more. To me, this is about one of the most surprising findings we have. Um, why is this so? The actual return sentiments are only marginally negative. The return process works well, refunds get issued, policies get honored, the process technically functions. So why are customers so fixated on it? Because of the effort. They feel it's unfair. When you have to return something, you are already disappointed. Now you have to put in effort, which keeps it in your memory and it lasts longer, even when it is fixed.
I think like from my personal experience and perception, I kind of can intuitively understand that like if I buy a product, but it's very easy to make a return, like the product is not right for me or I don't like it. And it's very easy to make a return and customer support is polite and fast in response. Actually, in my memory, what I will remember is like, oh, that was a good customer support. I trust the store more, like in terms of like they will resolve my issue, they will meet me halfway and they will help me. Even if like of course what we want is we want customers to choose the right product for them and be happy with the product, but if it's not the case, unfortunately, if something went wrong and the return policy is very easy and user friendly, that it still could be recoverable in terms of like the sentiment of the customer and the experience of the customer.
And I think here the recommendation that we have for you really is try to make this whole process like frictionless. And like as much as you can, from like pre-filling forms, like automate updates and like simplified every touch point. You really have to think about like from the moment of refund, like the customer like is not happy, okay, what's their experience and how you can smoothen the experience and reduce their experience, reduce their cognitive effort, and reduce the resource they have to put into it. Because when you do it, they will forget. If you don't do it, they will fixate. So that's an extremely important one.
And this
is also very interesting, isn't it?
Yes, it's about catching problems before they become complaints. The green dots are kind of topics where we should be. Low mentions, high sentiment. But look at the high mentions and neutral sentiment around 3.0. So the sentiments are not too bad, or you think are not too bad. But here is it. Customers don't write review saying the setup was as expected or checkout took the normal amount of time. You only mention neutral experience when they took mental energy, when they are stuck in your mind, when they went as smooth as expected. And yeah, Fab, I don't know if you could go through the reviews to bring this to life a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for example, the setup was a bit tricky, but I got it working eventually. It would be nice if instructions were clear. Don't underestimate the impact on neutral reviews. Also, this one is a 4-star review. So people might think, okay, that's a good review, right? However, there is this sentiment underneath which still like show friction. So our recommendation really here is make sure that you analyze all your 3-star and 4-star review to understand exactly what are the friction points that can become a problem. And then I think as we mentioned, all these recommendations, like they have to be put into perspective. The context is really important because trust isn't universal. And I think the next slide, it kind of shed the light to it.
Yeah, I think this slide brings it to life that context is really, really important. Baseline offset indicate local sentiment climbing. For example, Brazil and Mexico lag behind the global average in terms of sentiment quite significantly. This could be due to operational inefficiencies and local perception and expectations. So these countries have much lower benchmarks in terms of sentiment, while countries like Singapore, Switzerland have well above expectation. So comparatively, the way I look at this, a 4.0 in Mexico is far better than a 4.2 sentiment score in Switzerland. That's looking at the two of them comparatively within their context. The key is to beat your local benchmark, not the global benchmark. So understand your true best set.
Find this slide is quite fascinating, like how much cultural difference matter, like how we express ourselves, what type of language we use, and what type of topics like we care about. Like, is it like delivery? Is it product quality? Like how is important aesthetics and design for specific countries? So what we can see from the data, like it's not the same. It's very like cultural dependent.
And there is a factor which is more dependent than others, apparently. I thought this one was extremely fascinating, Sylvester.
It is. In fact, I think if there's something that kind of resonates a lot with my experience, it is this one. Here, we're talking about the benchmark of service sentiment and the impact of service sentiment on overall sentiment. Again, we return to Mexico and Brazil. They have lower average sentiment, just as we saw, but yes, also they have lower service sentiment. But what is really interesting is that whilst their average sentiment or their benchmarks are lower, the effect of service sentiment on overall sentiment is much larger than elsewhere. So it looks more like the more my benchmark, the lower my impact. The more my impact, the lower my benchmark. So it brings to life the saying that the more you lack something, the more you value it, particularly within the service sentiment.
Mm-hmm. And I could add from this slide, we can see like it's important to see what is relevant for your specific segment. So things are not the same across the board. There is here like analytics inside of Judge.me app that is personalized for you comes into play, and we are aiming to provide like more information about like what is the benchmarks for your category, for your country. I believe this could be even more impactful and even bigger opportunity once you can see personalized recommendations for you.
I actually would almost suggest, let us know in the chat what you think about it, if this could be useful for you. So we're gonna hear, we want to hear from you on this. Right. I think we discussed a bunch of actions here, right? Anna.
Right, that was quite a lot, I believe. What have we learned today? Like the foundation. So we learned that value for money dominates, and how customers perceive the value is quite important as well. We actually have a question about this topic from Edison. In the case of not dropping prices immediately, what have you to say about a situation where almost all the market prefers quantity, cheap products, over quality, good products? I guess from my intuition, from looking at the data, I tend to agree that there is some kind of trend in there. Like if we want to scale to big quantity, then like price sensitivity is quite important, and like finding the right balance is quite important. That was my interpretation of the data, but I know, Fabrizio, you had slightly different perspective.
Yeah, I think it's really understanding like how price sensitive is like your category, right? When you mention like that, like it's all about like low prices. So and how you can, if that is important, and you know that that is important for your buyers, then how you can couple up that low price with the level of service, or like a perception of service, or perception of product that goes towards your that goes actually towards like a bigger, like a much like a higher proposition. So it's not, you can still have like low prices, but can build the perception of everything that you do as a company, as a brand, to really to sophisticate your product. So in that sense, like Mark, and again here, sometimes data analysis is very tricky, right? Because like there is a lot of interpretation of the data, but from what we're seeing from the data is, yeah, if you're highly price sensitive, you can still find a way to differentiate your services like on the product, and making sure that your perception of the value is higher than your competitor.